That's a little better. Amen. We went over we went over yesterday from verse 6 1 till about, I believe, verse 8, right? We already went through the details. That's going to be at the end of the last video that I put up on YouTube if you guys want to review it. But right now, just for the sake of context, I'll simply read over it. But we have already explained it last time. So we'll just simply start chapter 6, but we'll start the study in verse 9. Okay. Then the people began to multiply on the earth, and daughters were born to them. The sons of God saw the beautiful women and took any they wanted as their wives. Then the Lord said, My spirit will not put up with humans for such a long time, for they are only mortal flesh. In the future, their normal lifespan will be no more than 120 years. In those days, and for some time after, giant Nephilites lived on the earth. For whenever the sons of God had relations with women, they gave birth to children who became the heroes and famous warriors of ancient times. The Lord observed the extent of human wickedness on the earth, and he saw that everything they thought or imagined was consistently and totally evil. So the Lord was sorry he had ever made them and put them on the earth. It broke his heart. And the Lord said, I will wipe this human race I have created from the face of the earth. Yes, and I will destroy every living thing, all the people, the large animals, the small animals that scurry along the ground, and even the birds of the sky. I'm sorry I ever made them, but Noah found favor with the Lord. Some people identify the large animals as maybe dinosaurs, because they definitely did exist in the past. We talk in the book of Job. It talks about Leviathan and also Behemoth. Behemoth was considered to be the Brontosaurus. If you ever look at the description of Behemoth in the book of Job, it just identifies a Brontosaurus clearly. Now, Leviathan is more thought of to be a dragon or maybe a different type of dinosaur that inhabits the waters. So, but right here, the large animals, there's no reason to identify that they were large. You could have just said animals, but, we'll continue. So we're going to go into the story of Noah. Now, before we go into verse 9 and afterwards, I have a couple of notes here that I need to consider sharing with you, especially because a lot of it has to do with other civilizations. For example, in even other religions for that matter, similar flood narratives are found in Egyptian, in Babylonian, in Persian, Greek, Hindu, and Chinese cultures. Also, the Druids, the Polynesians, the Mexicans, the Peruvians, and American Indian all have legends of a flood on the earth where certain people were saved by an ark or a boat. Some of these legends even have two doves. Now, a couple of details about Noah's Ark before we go into it. Noah's Ark was about 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high, using a cubit of approximately 18 inches. Now, this would give it a displacement of about 20,000 tons, very similar to the Titanic. Its 1.5 million cubic feet would hold about 522 standard livestock railroad cars, if you will. Assuming 240 sheep per car, that is equivalent to 125,000 sheep-sized animals. Some people estimate it could accommodate over 18,000 species. Now, a couple more details here. Noah was told to take 7 of each of the clean animals, right? And 2 of the unclean animals. Question: how did Noah know which were clean and which were unclean? These definitions were codified in the book of Leviticus much afterwards, which is one of the books of Moses. Many generations after Noah, the answer is pretty obvious. These ideas were originally ordained in the Garden of Eden, we discovered before. Now, the flood itself was more than just a lot of rain. The fountains of the deep were opened, right? They unleashed on the earth were sources of water that were apparently reserved for this purpose. Now, to go a little in a fringe topic, some scientists who specialize in interplanetary catastrophes argue that perhaps the planet Mars was involved. There are many very strange things on the planet Mars. It has no water, and yet there are clear signs of erosion by large bodies of water. It has also passed near the Earth. This will be explored a little bit later when we get into a different chapter. Now, the waters prevailed for about 150 days on the Earth. Noah and his family were in the ark for 371 days, 5 months floating, and 7 months on the mountain. God provided a singular opportunity: one ark, one door, right? Now, we read that there's no births or destructions, unalived. All in the ark were saved. How did God do it? Nobody really has any idea. Did he put those animals in hibernation? Possibly. Many competent scientists have explored these possibilities. Now, there have been a number of apparent sightings of the ark reported throughout history. Even as early as 275 BC, a Chaldean priest, Iraq, Chaldean priest, made a record of it. In AD 70, 35, 40 years after the Lord, went to heaven, Josephus, a historian, records the sighting. Now, in 1993, CBS, the TV network, produced a primetime special with alleged photographs of the ark. Now, none of these sightings have been confirmed, but they still remain provocative. And now, in 1916, some Russian aviators thought they saw the ark. They got the Tsar interested, from Russia, but the Russian Revolution interfered. Now, going forward into the early 1900s, George Hagopian made some trips in search of the ark. Many people have gone to Mount Ararat to search for the ark and have returned with all kinds of sketches and pieces of wood, but it's still a subject of much debate. Even recently, I've seen videos on YouTube where apparently there's a thing that looks like the ark on top of Mount Ararat, covered with grass and stuff, but really, really nobody really knows. But I can show you right now what the picture of the ark would possibly look like. Let me move this over here, because it's hard to imagine what the ark would look like, but this is the best description, the best picture, if you will. Here we go. This is what it looked like lengthwise. The little clearing above it, a little opening, right? Sideways. There's 3 levels of it inside, 3 levels, the front of it. Now, in comparison, right here, with the Titanic, the Queen Mary, the Wyoming, and the Santa Maria. So it was actually a little larger than Queen Mary or even the Titanic. Noah's Ark over here. It's about 3/4 of the size of the Titanic. However, it was a lot more space inside because it was made out of wood, not too much metal and stuff. But it gives you an idea what the ark kind of looked like. Now, here is something interesting. It had the almost the shape of a ship, right? But it had no navigation purposes. There was no wheel inside the ark. There was no wheel where you could actually stir the ark, which kind of shows you that it was the Lord directing it. And we're going to get into that in a little bit as well. Very, very interesting facts. So it was a very large ship, but it was very wide. That's what makes it a little different. It was very wide. All right. So with that being said, let me see more of my notes here. No, I think we're good. I think we can continue reading. Okay, so here we go. We're going to continue from chapter 6, verse 9. This is the account of Noah and his family. Noah was a righteous man, the only blameless. Let me see this. This crooked. Hold on, please. I think right there. Yes, you guys can see both top and bottom, right? It's a little crooked though. There you go. A little better. All right. Noah was a righteous man, the only blameless person living on earth at the time, and he walked in close fellowship with God. Noah was the father of 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now God saw that the earth had become corrupt and was filled with violence. God observed all this corruption in the world, for everyone on earth was corrupt, everyone. So God said to Noah, I have decided to destroy all living creatures, for they have filled the earth with violence. Yes, I will wipe them out along with the earth. That's a lot of stuff right there. Hold on. I have a few notes here that I want to share with you guys. See, I've had notes from before, and I had recent notes from me looking up the subject of Genesis the last few weeks. So, okay. In fact, I gotta go back a little bit here, and just a little of my older notes that I have about the Nephilim, the fallen angels and stuff. Now, the purity of God's creation had been turned into a moral cesspool. As the population grew, something began, a trend, if you will. The sons of God were cohabitating with many women as they desired. This led to moral decay that God hated. But who were the sons of God? We talked about these last time. Now, Bible experts agree that they were fallen angels. Now, we may wonder, though, why the sons of God were. But one fact is certain: they contributed greatly to the corruption that ran rampant throughout the earth. We covered this in detail last time. Now, God had created people in such a way that when their greatest pleasure and fulfillment would come from a personal relationship with Him, but didn't happen. The world had become filled with people who had no place for God. Following the example of Cain and Lamech, remember Genesis chapter 4, they pursued evil so that it filled the earth. Every inclination of their hearts and minds were bent on rebellion. They were alienated from their Creator and were destroying themselves by living in ways that opposed all the good God had planned for them. No matter what the social pressures are, each person chooses how to respond. Every individual is responsible to God. Let's not ever forget that. Now, at creation, God saw everything that He had made, right? Over here in this area. And it was very good. That was Genesis chapter 1, verse 31. Now, what He saw brought grief and filled His heart with pain. He was grieved over the terrible choices that people were making over here and over the judgments that He must give. God could not overlook the sin of the people who had been made in His image. Now, one thing about God, He never acts arbitrarily, nor does He punish people without reason. We know that. He is patient, even with those who defy Him. Many times in the Bible it says that. He does not want anyone to be judged, but desires everyone to repent of sin and turn to Him. So what happened? Well, we talk about Noah right here, right? One man stood apart from the rest of the human race. He had responded to God's grace, and God saw him as righteous and blameless. He wasn't perfect, mind you, he wasn't perfect, but of all the people on earth, Noah had chosen to withstand the tremendous pressure to fit in with this wickedness in society around him. Only Noah and his family walked in fellowship with God. Noah found favor with God, not because he did anything to earn it, and nothing really special, but because God offered His love and grace, and Noah responded. He provided his heart response by walking with God. He wasn't perfect, again, I'm telling you, but he definitely walked with God, listening to His voice and following His instructions. So far, so good. Now, at this point, with the flood, there's no turning back at this point. God had shown humankind His ways, right? But they had chosen to follow their own ways. God spoke to the one man who had not joined them in their determined pursuit of corruption. He told Noah that a terrible event was coming. God would surely destroy the evil people and the earth. Now, not immediately, though. He would give them time to turn from their evil ways. 120 years, as it turns out. That's how long it took Noah to build the ark. Now, this is the instructions right here, right? Build a large boat from cypress wood and waterproof it with tar, inside and out. Then construct decks and stalls throughout its interiors. Make the boat 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. Leave an 18-inch opening below the roof all the way around the boat. Put the door on the side and build 3 decks inside the boat, lower, middle, and upper. Noah was to build the ark, right? Or vessel that floats. We can call it ark for right now. From planks of cypress. Cypress is a light, durable hardwood. Okay? He was to make rooms in it and cover the inner and outer surfaces with pitch, which is like a thick, sticky substance like asphalt, used to seal and waterproof. God also gave directions for the roof and for an 18-inch window that would provide ventilation. He also said there should be a door on the side of the ark, and the ark should have 3 levels of decks, right? 3 levels. I showed you the picture a little while ago. Now, the punishment God predicted must have actually struck fear in Noah's heart. God had to cleanse the earth of its corruption. And I'm sure that Noah was seeing the stuff that was going on over here in the previous paragraphs. So he knew the corruption himself. And God would do it with awesome power. Nobody who ever had lived on earth had seen a flood. It never had rained before. So Noah could hardly have taken in the cataclysmic event that was going to happen. How could he even imagine a world purged of every living thing? Everything. Up until this time, it had never rained. God watered the earth by means of underground irrigation, with streams coming up from the earth, which provided the moisture needed. And don't forget that we talked about in the other previous verses, there was like a canopy effect, like a greenhouse. There was a lot of moisture in the air too, that the plants would be able to thrive. Let's continue. Look, I'm about to cover the earth with a flood that will destroy every living thing that breathes. Everything on earth will pass away. But I will confirm my covenant with you. So enter the boat, you and your wife and your sons and their wives. Bring a pair of every kind of animal, a male and a female, into the boat with you to keep them alive during the flood. Pairs of every kind of bird and every kind of animal and every kind of small animal that scurries along the ground. It will come to you to be kept alive. And be sure to take on board enough food for your animals, for your family, and for all the animals. So Noah did everything exactly as God had commanded him, right? Now, God set Noah's fears to rest when he said he would establish his covenant with Noah and his family. That's in verse 18. He would protect him from the punishment that would come on the earth, which is a very, very good news. It's definitely comforting for Noah, I would imagine. Now, the reason for the large size of the ark became clear to Noah, as God told him what it would contain. In addition to carrying Noah and his family, it would carry 2 of all living creatures and food for all. The size of the ark was far greater than normal ancient sailing vessels. In fact, it was not until 1858 that a vessel of great length was constructed. The Great Eastern was the vessel. It was 692 by 83 by 30 feet. Let's finish up right here. Verse 22. God showed his grace to Noah when he spared him from the coming judgment. Noah's response is stated so simply that it could be placed in his grave marker. He did everything exactly as God directed him. It would have been easy to doubt God, right? But he trusted God enough to do everything according to all that God commanded him. Noah did not ask questions or argue. He simply obeyed God. That's the key thing. He was righteous and he obeyed God. He didn't question him. Now, If we go to the New Testament, right? Specifically, Hebrews, Second Peter, but let me explain a couple of things. If we turn to the New Testament, we get a sense of what happened as Noah built the ark. Noah was known as a preacher of righteousness, a preacher of righteousness. That is in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 5. But no one seems to have heeded or heard his message or regarded his message, I guess is a better term. He disregarded the evil attitudes around him. Instead, we read in the book of Hebrews, by faith, Noah, being divinely warned of things not yet seen, moved with godly fear, prepared an ark for the saving of his household, by which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is according to faith. That's in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 7. Now, Noah expressed his faith in hard manual labor for 120 years. He and his sons made uncounted planks of cypress beams for the ark, lifting, sawing, hammering. Then there was a preparation for food. Don't forget about that. Planting, harvesting, storing food for several people and a large animal population. In the last analysis, it's gonna be measured by our love for God and our obedience to His word, not by our accomplishments. Now let's talk about his. I would imagine his community. Noah and his sons were building the ark, right? And as opportunities came, Noah spoke to people about righteousness. Remember, we read that God wanted people to repent. We can be sure they heaped on ridicule and mockery as Noah warned them. He warned them of complete coming judgment. I don't think they really listened. So far as a change of heart, they responded with complete indifference. They really didn't care. They don't want to be saved. They didn't believe Noah because it never had rained before. Jesus told the people of his day that while Noah was acting in obedience to God, his neighbors were carrying on life. Remember Matthew chapter 24, verse 37 to 39, I read to you guys the other day. Also Luke chapter 17, verse 26 and 27. They were carrying on life as it had been, assuming it would continue to go on generation after generation. They ate, they drank, they married, they gave their children to marriage without a thought that they would ever be held accountable to God. Now, as far as people were concerned, God had no part in their lives. They didn't even regard him. Wrongdoers may seem to prosper, but their success is only temporary. The future is safe for those who are upright. Only with the eye of faith can we see beyond this life to the reality that someday we will each have to account for to ourselves, to God, and receive the reward but for faithful service to him. Now, as far as Paul in 2 Corinthians, the Apostle Paul tells us that someday we must each appear before the judgment seat of Christ. The judgment seat, as Paul knew it, was a raised platform from which winners of athletic events were announced, where officials pronounced both sentences and commendations of subjects, good and bad, in other words. Now, let's continue now. Chapter 7. See, now we're cooking with gas. We're going to go on to chapter 7, which is pretty good. Now, when everything was ready, the Lord said to Noah, "Go into the boat with all your family, for among all the people of the earth, I can see that you alone are righteous." What does that mean? Well, after about 120 years of hard work, Noah and his sons had completed building the ark. God issued the invitation for Noah and his whole family to go on board, right? The reason that Noah was singled out of all the earth's population is that God had found him righteous. No one else was. God's favor had been extended to him, to Noah. He had responded with faith, and Noah proved his faith by 120 years of continual loving obedience to God. Take with you 7 pairs, 7 pairs, male and female, of each animal I have approved for eating and for sacrifice. And take 1 pair of each of the others. So basically, these are clean considered clean animals. The others are unclean. Also, take 7 pairs of every kind of bird. There must be a male and a female in each pair to ensure that all life will survive on the earth after the flood. 7 days from now, I will make the rains pour down on the earth, and it will rain for 40 days and 40 nights until I have wiped from the earth all the living creatures I have created. So Noah did everything as the Lord commanded him. Now, God planned for the ark to carry breeding pairs of animal kinds to preserve life, right? He was also to bring 7 pairs of each kind of clean animal. These were for sacrificing to God and possibly for food after the flood. Again, we read that Noah meticulously, very carefully followed the Lord's directions. He obeyed God because he believed God. That's a key word. He believed God. Let me see here. Now, all these animals would help repopulate the animal kingdom after the flood. Now, I kind of hinted at this earlier, but the distinction between clean and unclean animals, God gave to Israel actually at Mount Sinai in Leviticus chapter 11 and Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 3 to 12. It shows that the people knew the distinction, possibly all the way back to Adam and Eve, when they would offer sacrifices. Remember, we talked about Cain and Abel offering sacrifices too? So that's something to consider. Now, the number 40 days and 40 nights in verse 4. The number 40 is often associated with affliction, trial, testing, or punishment. Okay? Now, there's a lot of 40s in the Bible. It's often associated with affliction, suffering, trial, testing, or punishment. Let me fix this. Hold on. Hold on, something. Let me see. The screen. There you go. A little better. Thank you. Now, something beautiful in verse 1. In verse 1, it says, when everything was ready, the Lord said to Noah, go into the boat with all your family, for among all the people of the earth, I can see that you alone are righteous. Now, in some translations, the Amplified Bible, the King James, the NET, and the New King James Version, it says, come into the ark. Interesting. Come into the ark, signifying that God will be in the ark with them already. They would all be safe with him. Remember, the ark could not be navigated. It could only float. It didn't have a steering wheel or anything like that at all. It didn't have a rudder either. So, but the interesting thing, in some translations, if you have a King James, Amplified Bible, a New King James, or NET, it says, come into the ark. That means that he's already inside. Just want to let you guys know. It's something, I think it's something beautiful. Now, let's continue here. Verse 6. Hold on a second here. Hold on, please. Okay, let's continue. I want to make sure you guys can see this because we're gonna read till about verse 16. Noah was 600 years old when the flood covered the earth. He went on board the boat to escape the flood. He and his wife and his sons and their wives. With them were all the various kinds of animals, those approved for eating and for sacrifice, and those that were not, along with all the birds and the small animals that scurry along the ground. They entered the boat in pairs, male and female, just as God had commanded Noah. After 7 days, the waters of the flood came and covered the earth. When Noah was 600 years old, on the 17th day of the second month, all the underground waters erupted from the earth, and the rain fell in mighty torrents from the sky. The rain continued to fall for 40 days and 40 nights. That very day, Noah had gone into the boat with his wife and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives. With them in the boat were pairs of every kind of animal, domestic and wild, large and small, along with birds of every kind. 2 by 2 they came into the boat, representing every living thing that breathes. A male and female of each kind entered, just as God had commanded Noah. Then the Lord closed the door behind them. Now, Noah did exactly as God had commanded him, right? God had directed him to take animals into the ark, but did not specify how Noah was to go about the task. The scriptures read simply that the animals went into the ark to Noah. Genesis chapter 7, verse 9. There were no massive roundup with Noah and his sons compelling reluctant animals to go into the ark. The animals knew they were supposed to go in there. The crew and passengers were on board 7 days before the Lord shut the door. We could only imagine the reaction of Noah's neighbors as they observed the drama being performed in broad daylight. Inside the ark, Noah and his family were probably getting the animals settled in their places, right? Outside the ark was God, perhaps giving people one last opportunity to listen the warnings Noah had been giving for the past 120 years. What then was the reaction when the door was closed without any visible hand moving it? Keep that in mind. They saw the door closed, but nobody really closed it. Only God did. Let me see something here. Yes, okay. For 40 days, the floodwaters grew deeper, covering the earth, the ground, and lifting the boat high above the earth. I gotta make sure you guys can see this. Hold on, give me a second here. Okay, top and the bottom, right? Okay, good job. As the waters rose higher and higher above the ground, the boat floated safely on the surface. Finally, the water covered even the highest mountains on the earth, rising more than 22 feet above the highest peaks. This is important here. I have a couple of notes here. Now, I'm going to read this, just verse 20. Rising more than 22 feet above the highest peaks. The highest peak at that time was Mount Ararat. Mount Ararat in Turkey. It reaches 17,000 feet. Okay, that's over 3 miles. 3 miles, right? That was covered with water. And on top of that, it was even a little bit higher after that. 22 feet above the highest peaks. So that was about over 3 miles high of water. Just want you to consider that right there. Now, exactly as God had said, the rains came, 40 days and 40 nights of it. Subterranean fountains opened to add to the massive downpour from above. As the waters rose, the ark gradually began to float. Before he sent the flood, God gave people 120 years of warning. During this time, the people carried on the business of daily living without a thought of impending judgment. They really didn't believe Noah. They didn't really have God in their lives either. Now, this parallels to society today, and that's very, very obvious. It's very, very tragic to be exact. Very tragic. Now, as we're going to cover in the next chapter, we do not have to worry about God flooding the earth again. This does not mean, however, that there will be no earthly or eternal consequences for those who disobey God. Remember in the Bible, we read in Revelation, the next time the earth is destroyed, it'll be by fire. So here it was with water. Never again with water, but it'll be with fire at the end of time. Fire. Now, God is just and holy, and therefore he will not allow disobedience to go unnoticed. Some people may think, well, that's not fair. He said he wouldn't destroy with water, but he's going to destroy with fire in the future. Yes, he is, because God cannot allow disobedience to go unnoticed. That is why we are all in desperate need of Jesus, to be honest, because we all disobey God, and because only when we place our faith in Jesus will God see us as holy. Let's continue a little more. All the living things on earth passed away. The birds, the domestic animals, the wild animals. And consider this interesting. The birds that did not have to do with the earth, they were flying in the air, even they passed away. That's how bad the rain was. Domestic animals, wild animals, small animals that scurry along the ground, and all the people. Everything that breathed and lived on dry land passed away. God wiped out every living thing on the earth. People, livestock, small animals that scurry along the ground, and the birds of the sky. They were all destroyed. The only people who survived were Noah and those with him in the boat. And the floodwaters covered the earth for 150 days. Now, what God had promised came true. He fulfilled it. Outside the ark, every living thing on earth was destroyed, right? Except for marine life. Sin had covered the earth. Now it was cleansed. God always kept his word. His promises never fail. Whether the promise is of salvation or judgment, a person may make a promise and be sincere when he makes it, right? But for reasons beyond his control, he may not be able to keep his word. God is not a frail human. He is totally able to fulfill every promise he makes. A flood, which is an unheard of cataclysm event in ancient times, have been included in many traditions of literally hundreds of civilizations, from Babylon, Papua New Guinea to Native Americans, Peru, like I said, covered, Mexico covered that, Greenland, Wales, India, China, and many, many others. In more than half of the traditions, the disastrous event was caused by the evil acts of people. Now, it is apparent that the accounts come from one source. Though the details of the flood account have been adapted to the local culture, different depending who you hear it from, what nationality, what text, even what religion, what is consistent is some historical accuracy and the moral implications. I mean, what did it mean, right? Now, since an account of the flood is so widespread, you would think that people of all cultures would order their lives in the light of the potential of God's judgment. But as we look around the world, even now, we know this is not so. People live now much as they did in the days before the flood. And like I said before a few times, they're eating, they're drinking, they're marrying, they're giving in marriage without a thought of coming judgment. Now, was the question that people sometimes have, was the flood worldwide or was it confined to the Fertile Crescent, the Middle East? Well, obviously it was worldwide. Where the descendants of Adam probably lived, that was a Fertile Crescent, by the way. Now, here's a couple of viewpoints, just to let you know what other people think. People think there was a limited flood. Some people think there was a limited flood because they believe it fits the views of modern science, pointing out that rocks and fossil records do not seem to support a worldwide flood. Yet they say that if the purpose of the flood was to destroy evil people, they were all living in the area known as the Fertile Crescent, the Middle East. But that's not true. Other people believe in a worldwide flood. Now, it points to the scripture statements that all the high hills under the whole heaven were covered. Genesis chapter 7, verse 19. We read that a little while ago. And that he destroyed all living things which were on the face of the ground. Genesis chapter 7, verse 23. So, while the debate actually continues, people have different views of the flood. It's easy to overlook the one great lesson to be learned from the flood. That God accomplished his will in the flood. That he will indeed judge all people someday. In the flood, God revealed his hatred for sin. Let's not forget that. All right, so let's go to the next chapter. Oh, excuse me. The flood recedes. This is going to be interesting. We're doing pretty good. We're going to read a little bit of this. We should end, but I think we can read a part of it at least. Chapter 8. In fact, let me share some of the notes that I have. So it's like a little preview, if you will. So far we talked about the flood, right? Right? Now the flood recedes. It starts, going away. The flood ends. About the 264th day, Noah sent out a raven. The raven did not return. On the 271st day, he sent out a dove, and the dove came back. On the 278th day, dove number 2 was sent out and returned with an olive branch. On the 285th day, the third dove was sent out and did not come back. So on the 314th day, Noah removed the roof, and on the 371st, they disembarked after 53 weeks in the ark. Now, Genesis chapter 8, verse 4 is going to say, "And the ark rested in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, upon the mountains of Ararat." Mount Ararat. If you're a typical Bible reader, you might just continue reading, right? But once you realize that everything is there by deliberate design, you may wonder, why did God record the exact day of the ark landing? Let me explain a couple things. The Jews have 2 calendars. Their civil calendar starts with something called Rosh Hashanah in the month of Tishri in the fall, right? However, in Exodus chapter 12, verse 2, when the Passover was being instituted, God instructed to Moses, "This month, the month of Nisan, in the spring, shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you." Thus, the Jews actually have 2 calendars. They have the old Genesis calendar, which starts at the first of the Tishri, and they also have a religious calendar, which begins with the month of Nisan, in which Tishri turns out to be the 7th month. We'll cover a little bit more of that, or if we ever get into Exodus, you'll see that. Now, another note. Jesus was crucified on Passover, which is on the 14th of Nisan. He was in the grave 3 days, resurrected on the 17th day of the 7th month of the Genesis calendar. God's new beginning on the planet Earth under Noah was on the anniversary in anticipation of our new beginning in Jesus Christ. Just a little fact there for you guys to digest. It wasn't exactly the same day. Let's see here. Okay. Let's how far can we read? Because I want to cover some of the quiz notes as well. You know what? I think we're gonna stop right here because I don't want to leave you halfway.